Yo, welcome to the Oddity Report. The Oddity Report. It's your host, Dnota. Listen, giving up. Like, when should you give up? Should you give up? Listen, giving up is part of growing up. If you don't ever give up, then how could you possibly grow up? That thing you've invested so much into no longer deserves you. But why do you still persist? I say it's simply because you don't know any better. Well, here are a few things to consider whether to give up in order to grow up. Look, consistent lack of progress. Despite your best efforts, you aren't seeing any meaningful progress. I mean, it's been, what, 5 years? And you've been working on that new recipe that's going to, bust the market wide open. Listen, brother, it ain't happening. It's time to grow up by giving up. Maybe you got a little bit of emotional drain, the situation is causing persistent stress and anxiety. It's a signal that it's taking more than it's given. I mean, you driving the people around you crazy. Maybe that's a signal that you ought to give up in order to grow up, huh? Loss of passion. When you no longer feel motivated or passionate. It's more of a burdening joy. What are we really doing? It's time to give up. Give it up. Throw it away. You don't need it. Like carrying around a wet sock. It does you no good, brother or sister. I don't give a damn. Continued setbacks. When every step forward feels like 2 step backs. You're headed in the wrong direction. Perhaps you don't have a direction. It's time to give up and grow up. You don't want to keep trying to straddle the fence. It's time to let go. Now, maybe, what it is that you're pursuing no longer aligns with your values. See, when the goal, the person, or the project no longer aligns with your core values, it's time to give up in order to grow up. If you continue to pursue something out of a sense of obligation, guilt, fear of failure, rather than true desire, your heart just not into it anymore. You're just not that into it anymore. It's time to perhaps give up. Now listen, you'll notice I've been talking for a while, few minutes. For the last several minutes, and if you've noticed, you haven't heard a peep out of Dua. Now, there's a good reason for that. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that reason is, but I have a few suspicions as to why. First, there was some sort of space abduction. See, I think she got a little too deep into one of those conspiracy theories because she was always reading these books. And it always has some weird storyline and mystical figures and things that I didn't even probe because I didn't want to go there. I believe you just accept people how they are. And so I think, some of those conspiracy theories that she was delving into, perhaps she got a little too carried away. And now she's hosting the podcast on Mars. Now, here's another possibility, right? And these possibilities are in no particular order. I think perhaps, she joined a cult. right? During her time off, she went off to live in the mountains, chanting about the mysteries of the universe. I think that's a possibility. And I also think this is the last possibility. And I want you guys to really to think about these. And I want you in the comment sections to rank these in an order of most plausible, the most likely scenarios as to, to explain the absence of Dua. She's an alien overlord. She had to return home to her planet to avoid exposing the alien agenda. Now, Trump just won the election. And there's a lot of people who's not, let's just say, excited about the fact that he won. And so I think with Dua having been the alien overlord, uh, I think she definitely had to return to her planet to, to advise them in terms of what is the next appropriate course of action now that we have a new president. I don't know.
Dnota, I've been right here on planet Earth. I've been right here
Oh, wow.
staring at the moon,
Okay.
just pondering what's next for me.
What do you mean?
I've been here just trying to be gentle with myself after tripping and tumbling and scowling at my bruises. You see, Dnota, I didn't notice the silence because I've been having silent conversations with myself. Ghosts, not the ghosts that you were talking about, shadows, and echoing voices. That's where I've been.
Okay. So you just basically had better things to be concerned with.
Not quite, my
Okay.
dear friend.
So you've been like just like pondering at the skies.
I've been pondering. You know,
Good.
I turned another year older, and
Good.
with that comes ponderance.
Okay. So what are some of the things that you've discovered in this ponderance?
I've discovered that I've been hard on myself. I can give great advice to others, but I don't take the same advice. I'm hard on myself, and it made me realize it's okay. It's okay to continue to not give up, right? To continue to keep striving. That just because I didn't hit goals at a certain time, it's okay.
What are one of the goals that you haven't hit that you feel is something that you're gonna commit to 2025 to really exploring and seeing through completion?
So this might sound a little corny, but just finding more moments of joy. I tend to like I was telling you, like I stumble and I kind of fall into a pit, and it takes me a while to like get out of that pit because I'm not doing things that bring me joy. So just
Okay.
finding those moments more often.
Gotcha. Do you feel like you're closer to those moments today than you were perhaps 3 months ago?
Oh, for sure. I feel like I've learned little practices that are easy to implement that
Okay.
I can definitely carry into 25.
Gotcha. Do you have a couple of things that you wish to share with the listening audience who perhaps maybe because the holidays are a peculiar time.
Mm-hmm.
It's an opportunity for family members and loved ones to come together, friends to come together, but also in the process of coming together, there sometimes can be interesting dynamics that exist between friendships
Mm-hmm.
and family members. And then there's the other component of where you stand in relationship to these individuals, as well as like what your own goals and aspirations are, meaning like you have to balance all of these variables,
Mm-hmm.
and it could be overwhelming, it could be stressful. What are some of the things you say that you've done to help you balance all of these equities?
That is such a great question. So for me, it's realizing that it's okay to prioritize myself, if that
Okay.
makes sense. Like not doing what's expected of me because that doesn't necessarily that brings upon stress. So feeling like it's okay to prioritize what I want to do and not feel the usual guilt that would come with that.
What guilt do you associate with, meeting the expectations of others?
So feeling like I need to please everyone. That's the biggest mistake, right?
Okay.
And so when I have a pretty large family, so trying to
I have a pretty large family too. I mean, we stretch the breadth of the globe. Continue, please.
yes. So my what I discovered about myself is I feel like I have to do certain things to meet their expectations of me. And in trying to do so, I just stress myself
But
out.
have someone ever articulated out loud, not anything that you've interpreted to mean something, but have they ever said it to you like, "Hey, these are the expectations we have of you."
Not necessarily, but there'll be comments like, you haven't called me. Or, when's the next time you're going to visit me? Or, I thought you were going to be there. Those things.
So you saying like the expectations were never like, and we're not set. Look, in terms of like how I'm trying to approach it, and I think this is a great topic of discussion, right? Because what we're trying to juxtapose is other people's expectations, right? Versus like what it is that we expect of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But the other part is the more nuanced aspect in terms of what is the mechanism by which other people's expectations are communicated. Because you said there will be comments, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I agree in terms of we hear comments and we make an interpretation of what those comments really mean.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question would be, outside of someone communicating, what, or trying to project their expectations, like when you hear a remark as you've just recounted those remarks,
Mm-hmm.
what how do they align with your expectations?
That's a great question. Most of the time, I'm surprised because, for example, it'll be the first time I heard it.
Okay.
So it's not like the expectation was clearly communicated beforehand. It's mostly like after the fact. I didn't do what they expected me to do, though they never communicated it to me. So I'm hearing it after the fact, and that stresses me out. So I think, oh, moving forward, I have to do X, Y, and Z.
I got you. And I think, just in general, because I think I understand the dynamic or the challenge that you are contending with. And I think a lot of us contend with in different ways is the idea of how do we reconcile what we want with other people's expectations of us. And I think we owe a duty and a fealty to ourselves above all else, because if we aren't obligated to ourselves, then how can we be of proper service to anyone else?
Mm-hmm.
If you're not loving yourself, if you're not meeting your needs, you certainly are in no position to meet the needs of others. So I think it's important, like as we go through these holidays like that are, before us, is, they come back to back. We got Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, Valentine's Day, all of these holidays, right? Where part of like what really makes these holidays is the idea of being together, right?
Yes.
This social component.
Yes.
But then there's the other aspect that is not spoken of in terms of like the dread of having these awkward exchanges with people that you love, some more than others. And that's okay. It's true. But the whole thing about the holidays is, availing ourselves like in terms of humility and being willing to like tolerate one another, because that's what we're doing, if we're going to be honest. Not always are these exchanges the most desirable. They're not the most desirous exchanges or interactions, and that's okay too. And I think all of us, no one is free from being able to like, contend with this idea of loving someone, but recognizing like you may not necessarily benefit always by being in their presence.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of them may precede, the 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 the, the romance of what we imagine.
Hmm.
So I think it's important for this holiday season that we take time out to think about what it is that we want.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's okay to be a little bit selfish. In fact, I would implore you to be a little bit selfish. Otherwise, you can't be available to everyone else. If you're not taking care of you,
Mm-hmm.
then what can you possibly do of value for someone else?
Mm-hmm.
You have to put yourself first in order to be that servant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that neglect that we sometimes have for ourselves is going to show up in our relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really thinking about this whole idea of fostering and cultivating relationships where you're going to be fully available for other people, then you have to be able to, pour back into your own, cup.
Right.
You have to be willing to pour back into your own cup. And so reconciling between what someone else expects and what it is that you want, I think the middle ground is maybe bringing to each other's attention that, we are imperfect and that we owe a duty to one another to articulate what it is our expectations, or framing in another light what our hopes and aspirations are.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we owe a duty to one another in terms of being sensitive to each other's needs. That's an obligation that we have to one another. So if we turn a blind eye, not allowing a person the space to love themselves or to actually augment the way that they feel about themselves by trying to make them feel guilty because they're not meeting our expectations.
Mm.
We really, all of us, need to take a moment, reflect in that mirror, spend more time in that mirror having a conversation with yourself about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much to be gained just by that simple exercise. Because if you have the audacity to stand in that mirror and lie to yourself, well, there's nothing further for me to add that I can add to your life because you insist on living a lie. But if you insist on truth, and, the scriptures say the truth shall make you free, then you have that honest conversation. And sometimes you have to have that conversation out loud. It can't always be an act of meditation. It has to be an act of contrition that is expressed and verbalized. But I would urge each and every one of us not to make the burden of our brother or our sister any more strenuous than it already is. Stop with the expectations. First, if we're going to have an expectation, it should be of ourselves. We should expect more from ourselves. If we expect more from ourselves, we would be that perfect example for someone, and they would in turn expect more of themselves. So this holiday season, spend time with yourself. Learn something new about yourself that you didn't know yesterday. And when you learn new things about yourself, you can share new things about yourself with others. So I'm not going to belabor the point. I think we are at a good natural stopping point. Thus, the topic of this discussion: when is the proper time to give up? If you notice, we do not encourage anyone to give up, but we certainly urge you to grow up And sometimes when you give up, you grow up because you recognize that you have less of need of what it is that you sought after, and that it doesn't add to your growth and development. So this is a natural stopping point, and that's okay. So give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to be free of burden, to be free of other people's expectations, and to be free of other people's failures and shortcomings, because people have no qualms with, you know, dumping on you emotionally, psychologically, and they will overwhelm you. But you must love yourself, and you must be your best protector. I have nothing further to add, do I? What do you make of what we just spoke about, and then taking all of what I've just said and some of the things that you've shared with the audience in terms of your natural progression and your goals and objectives moving into 2025? What say you?
I want to go back to what you were saying about having conversations with yourself. I think a really good practice that I started and I want to continue is sitting in silence. And I say that because in silence, your true feelings bubble up to the surface.
That's true.
And you come to terms with a lot of things. And I feel like once you have clarity, then you can go and share, because sharing for me holds me accountable.
Okay.
So I implore silence, I implore sharing, and I implore accountability.
That's not a polite way of you telling me to shut up now, is it?
No, not at all.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, this was a great discussion. I'm glad that you're back. I'm glad that you're back with us. One of the things I wanted to talk about, we'll certainly get to it for next week topic, but I've noticed that you've been dressing a little salaciously. I'm not sure of whether or not this is some type of scam to catch me in some type of erotic trap. We're going to get to the bottom of it next week. We expect for you to have an explanation for, how you've packaged yourself, and we're gonna really delve deep into this because this cannot stand.
Okay, Dnota, we'll talk.
All right, this is the Oddity Report.